I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, paralyzed by the sight in front of me. My weekend bag slipped from my shoulder and hit the floor with a heavy thud, but I barely heard it. The corner of the living room, where my 1927 Steinway Model B had sat for 50 years, was completely empty. The hardwood floor where its heavy, curved legs used to rest was marked by 3 distinct, dust-filled rectangles, lighter than the rest of the room. It looked like a graveyard where a ghost used to live. In its place stood a flimsy, folding card table holding a cheap, plastic DJ controller and 2 blinking speakers that looked like toys. "Surprise!" my brother, Jagger, yelled. He popped a small confetti cannon, sending bits of shiny paper fluttering down onto the empty space where my soul used to be. My mother, Maud, walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked pleased with herself, oblivious to the horror on my face. "Don't look so sour, Eliddy. We finally cleared out that dusty coffin so Jagger could have a real workspace. He's going to be a star." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like a giant hand was squeezing my lungs shut. They didn't just move a piece of furniture, they had erased my history. My name is Eliddy. 10 minutes ago, I was a classical pianist with a family heirloom. Now I was standing in a room that felt alien and cold. I had just walked into a betrayal that would cost exactly $80,000. The shock turned to hot lava in my veins. My hands started to shake, not from the cold, but from pure, unadulterated rage. I stepped over the confetti, my eyes locked on my parents. "Where is it?" I screamed, my voice cracking under the strain. My father, Roscoe, was sitting in his favorite recliner. He didn't even look up from the TV program he was watching. "Sold it. A guy with a truck came by this morning. Place called Vintage Finds. Got $500 for it. It covered Jagger's deck and a nice steak dinner for us." $500. The room spun around me. I reached into my bag, my fingers trembling violently as I pulled out a crisp document I had received just days ago. I slammed it onto the kitchen counter, so hard the salt shaker jumped and fell over. "You idiots," I said, my voice dangerously low, vibrating with anger. "I had it appraised last week for insurance purposes. That coffin is a fully restored vintage Steinway, be it is not junk. It is valued at exactly $80,000. Roscoe finally looked away from the TV. The color drained from his face, leaving it pale and clammy. Jagger stopped fiddling with his plastic knobs. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating, and terrifying. They had traded a fortune for a toy. The air left the room instantly, sucked out by the weight of the number I had just shouted. Maud snatched the paper from the counter, her eyes frantically scanning the numbers and the official seal. I expected her to gasp. I expected her to apologize or maybe even cry at the colossal mistake they had made. Instead, her face twisted into a mask of pure rage, directed entirely at me. "You knew," she hissed, crumpling the edge of the paper in her fist. "You sat on 80 grand while we have credit card debt. You selfish little brat." "It's my piano," I yelled back, tears stinging my eyes. "Grandma left it to me specifically. It wasn't yours to sell." "It was in our house," Roscoe said, standing up. His eyes weren't filled with regret for selling my heirloom, they were filled with greedy panic. "We need to get it back, right now, not to keep it, obviously. We need to resell it properly. Think about it, Eliddy. Jagger needs a tour van and the roof needs fixing." I stared at them in absolute horror. They didn't care about the sentimental loss. They didn't care that they had sold my most prized possession. They were only angry about the money they had missed out on. They saw my heritage as nothing more than a lottery ticket they had accidentally thrown in the trash. "Give me the receipt," I demanded, holding out my hand, my fingernails digging into my palms. Maud reached into the trash can under the sink and pulled out a crumpled yellow slip. She smoothed it out against her leg and threw it at me. It fluttered to the floor, and I had to bend down to pick it up, feeling small and defeated. It read, "Sold as is wood furniture item, $500. Seller, Maud and Roscoe." "You signed a bill of sale," I said, my voice shaking as I read the scribbled signature at the bottom. "You legally transferred ownership. You told them it was yours to sell." "Fix it," Maud ordered, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked at me like I was a servant who had messed up a simple coffee order. Go down there right now and tell them it was a mistake. Cry if you have to, make a scene. We can't lose that money. I am not doing this for you, I said, staring at her cold eyes. I am doing this for me. Just get it back, Jagger chimed in, already looking bored with the drama. I can't practice with you yelling about old furniture. They didn't care about my pain. They only cared about the profit. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drum. I drove to the warehouse address listed on the yellow receipt, speeding the whole way. I ran red lights in my mind, though I forced myself to stop at the real ones, tapping the steering wheel anxiously. My hands gripped the leather so tight my knuckles turned white. I found the unit in a gray industrial park. The large bay door was rolled up. Inside, a man in a sharp, tailored suit was overseeing two movers. They were carefully wrapping my piano in thick blue velvet blankets, treating it with the respect it deserved. This was Ambrose. He wasn't a sleazy pawn shop owner, he was a sophisticated collector. He looked up as I ran in, out of breath and frantic. He saw the panic in my eyes immediately. Please, I begged, holding up the crumpled yellow slip. My parents sold this by mistake. It's mine. They didn't know what it was. Ambrose looked at me, then back at the piano. He didn't look malicious, just practical. I have a signed bill of sale, miss, and frankly, for $500, I just made the deal of the century. I know exactly what this is worth. The way he touched the polished wood told me everything. He wasn't ignorant. He knew he had struck gold, and he wasn't about to let it go. I tried to explain the theft. I tried to explain that my grandmother had given it to me, that it was the only thing I had left of her, and that I played it every single day. But Ambrose's expression remained cold and detached. Possession is 9/10 of the law, he said smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. Your parents had keys to the house. They claimed ownership. They signed the paper. If you want it back, the price is $80,000. I'm a businessman, not a charity. He checked his watch and signaled the movers with a sharp wave. Load it up. I watched in absolute agony as they hoisted the piano onto a dolly. The wheels squeaked as they rolled my grandmother's legacy toward the waiting truck. It felt like they were rolling away a piece of my body. You can't do this, I shouted, tears streaming down my face now. I already did, Ambrose said, handing me his business card. Have a good day. The metal door of the truck slammed shut with a final, booming thud that echoed in the empty warehouse. The engine roared to life, and I stood there in the empty parking lot, watching the taillights fade into the distance, taking my heart with them. I returned home completely defeated. Before I even opened the front door, I could feel the house vibrating. A low, distorted thumping sound was shaking the windows in their frames. I walked inside. Jagger was blasting bass-heavy electronic music at full volume. He was screaming into a microphone, check, 1, 2, make some noise. The sound was awful, a chaotic mess of noise that hurt my ears. Maud was in the kitchen, casually cutting vegetables for a salad. She looked up expectantly. Did you get the money? She shouted over the noise. No, I said, my voice flat and broken. He knows the value, he's keeping it. Jagger stopped the music abruptly. The silence that followed was ringing in my ears. You let him keep my inheritance, he yelled, throwing his arms up in the air. That money was for my career. Do you know how much a professional setup costs? The delusion was absolute. They truly believed the money was theirs. They didn't see a stolen instrument. They saw a stolen paycheck that I had failed to deliver. It wasn't your inheritance, I whispered, shaking my head. It was my piano. You're useless, Roscoe grumbled from the living room, shaking his head. Absolutely useless. I went to my room and locked the door, burying my face in my pillow so they wouldn't hear me scream. The next morning, the dynamic in the house shifted from panic to punishment. Maud and Roscoe sat me down at the kitchen table before I could leave for work. They looked stern, like I was a naughty child who had failed a math test. Since you lost the family $79,500 by not securing the asset, Roscoe said, reading from a script Maud had clearly written for him. "You need to make it up to us." I stared at them, incredulous. "You want me to pay you for selling my property?" "Rent," Maud smiled, a cold, shark-like expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Market rate is high these days. We're charging you $2,000 a month, starting immediately. You can back pay for this month today." "I can't afford that," I protested, standing up. "That's my entire paycheck. How will I eat?" "Then you can leave," Maud said, shrugging as she sipped her coffee. "If you aren't contributing to this family's future, Jagger's future, then you are just a leech. Pay up or get out." My stomach turned. They were trying to bleed me dry to replace the money they had lost through their own stupidity and greed. They were punishing me for being the victim. I left the house and went straight to the police station. I needed someone to tell me this was illegal. I needed an adult to step in and fix this mess. I sat across from a tired-looking officer, explaining the situation. I showed him the appraisal and the picture of the empty spot in the living room. "You live with the suspects?" the officer asked, looking at my ID. There was no forced entry. "They are my parents," I said, feeling ridiculous, "but the piano was mine. They stole it." The officer sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Without a deed or title on your person, and since it was sold from the primary residence by the homeowners, this is considered a civil domestic dispute. We can't arrest your parents for selling furniture from their own living room." "It wasn't furniture," I insisted, slamming my hand on the desk. "It was an $80,000 instrument." "I believe you," he said sympathetically. "But the law sees it as a household item. You need a lawyer, not a cop. There is nothing we can do here." I walked out of the station feeling smaller than ever. The system wasn't built to protect me from my own family. I was on my own. I needed proof. Undeniable, legal proof that the piano belonged to me. I called Tally's, my best friend who worked as a paralegal. She told me to come over immediately. "We need the will," Tally said, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. "If your grandmother left it to you, it went through probate." My parents had handled all the probate stuff 5 years ago. They told me everything had been taken care of, and that there wasn't much money left after debts. I had believed them. Tally's logged into the county clerk's digital archives. It took her 20 minutes of searching through files. "Got it," she said, pointing to the screen. She turned the laptop toward me. There it was, in black and white. Item 4. To my granddaughter, Liddy, I leave my 1927 Steinway B, requesting she keep music in the family. My heart hammered in my chest. They knew. They had always known. They had lied to me for 5 years, waiting for a moment to cash in on my inheritance. "They stole it," Tally said firmly, printing the document. "This proves title. It was never their property to sell." We printed 3 copies. I folded one into my pocket. It felt like a weapon, heavy and dangerous. I went home that evening ready for war. I walked into the kitchen where they were eating dinner, thick steaks purchased with the $500 they got for my soul. I slammed the printed will onto the table, right between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat. "It was never yours to sell," I said, my voice steady and cold. "This is felony theft. I have the will. Item number 4. Jagger didn't look up from his phone. Roscoe stopped chewing, a piece of steak hanging from his fork. Maud didn't flinch. She picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip. "We're your parents, Liddy," she said dismissively. "We have power of attorney. We make the financial decisions for this household." "Not since I turned 18, I countered, leaning over the table. "And not over property that is specifically deeded to me. You committed fraud." "Don't use that tone with me," Roscoe warned, pointing his fork at me. "I'm going to sue you," I said. The words hung in the air like smoke. The room went deadly silent. The chewing stopped. The scrolling stopped. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in their eyes, not fear for me, but fear for themselves. I went to work the next day, feeling a strange mix of dread and liberation. But when I came home, my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I jiggled it, thinking it was stuck. Nothing. I looked closely and saw the hardware was shiny and new. They had changed the locks while I was at work. There was a note taped to the door at eye level. Ungrateful daughters who threaten lawsuits aren't welcome in this home. Jagger needs your room for a vocal booth. We will send your bill for the locksmith. I looked down at the porch. My clothes were stuffed into 3 black garbage bags. My books were in a cardboard box that had been left out in the damp air. I was homeless. I stood there, staring at the closed door. I could hear the muffled sound of bass thumping from inside. Jagger was already moving his equipment into my room. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had discarded me like trash because I dared to stand up for myself. I grabbed a garbage bag and started to walk. I dragged my heavy bags to the curb and called an Uber. I went straight to Tally's apartment. I didn't cry until I saw her face when she opened the door. "We are going to destroy them," Tally said, pulling me into a hug and handing me a large glass of wine. "But first, we need the piano secured. If that collector sells it to someone else, it's gone forever." I nodded, wiping my eyes, and pulled out Ambrose's business card. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. When I told Ambrose about the will and the lockout, his tone changed. He listened quietly. He wasn't just a cold businessman anymore. He sounded offended by their cruelty. "They kicked you out," he asked, his voice sharp, "over a piano they stole." "Yes," I said. "I have the probate documents now. I can prove it." "Come to my office tomorrow morning," Ambrose said. "Bring the paperwork. We need to talk strategy. I don't like thieves." I hung up, feeling a glimmer of hope. The enemy of my enemy might just be my friend. Ambrose's office was sleek and modern, smelling of expensive leather and old money. He looked over the will and the appraisal documents Tally's had prepared for me. "Here is the reality," Ambrose said, leaning back in his chair. "If I keep the piano and you sue your parents, the court might order the piano returned to you anyway. Then I'm out $500 and the piano." He leaned forward, his eyes serious. "However, if I help you, I can protect my reputation. I don't deal in stolen goods." He drafted a terrifying legal letter right in front of me. It was titled, "Notice of Void Transaction Due to Fraudulent Title." He demanded his $500 back, plus legal fees. He stated clearly that he was freezing the asset and would cooperate fully with the rightful owner. "We are going to threaten them with charges for fencing stolen goods," Ambrose said. "Your parents don't fear jail. They fear losing the chance at the $80,000. We need to show them that the money is never coming to them." It was a bold move, but it was the only way to shake them. The next day, Maud showed up at Ambrose's gallery. She must have received the letter. She looked manic, her hair slightly messy, her eyes darting around the expensive art on the walls. I was in the back room with the door cracked open, listening to every word. "My daughter is mentally unstable," Maud lied smoothly to Ambrose, putting on her best concerned mother act. "She forged those documents. The piano is ours." Ambrose stood behind his desk, calm and imposing. "I have the certified probate records, ma'am. They are not forgeries." Maud leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, we can work something out. If you pay us, say $40,000 cash under the table, we'll sign a waiver. You keep the piano, we walk away, and Liddy gets nothing. This all goes away." I covered my mouth to stop a gasp. She was trying to undercut me and extort him simultaneously. She was willing to sell me out completely for half the value just to get some cash in her hand. It was sickening. Ambrose smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a predator's smile. He tapped his phone, which was sitting face up on the desk. "Ma'am," he said clearly, "you just admitted to knowing the piano ownership is in dispute and attempted to solicit a bribe. I have this entire conversation recorded." Maud's face crumbled. The arrogant mask fell away, revealing pure, unfiltered panic. You can't do that," she stammered, backing away. "I can," Ambrose said, standing up. "Please leave my property before I call the police for trespassing and attempted fraud." Maud started screaming. She called him a thief, a liar, and a crook. She knocked over a sculpture stand as she backed away, creating a loud crash. 2 security guards appeared instantly and escorted her out while she threatened to ruin him and everyone he knew. I walked out from the back room, shaking. Ambrose looked at me and nodded. "We have them. That recording is the final nail in the coffin." While Maud was imploding at the gallery, Jagger was busy ruining himself. He tried to host a rave at a local dive bar to raise money for their legal fees. He had used Maud's credit card to rent the venue, promising the owner he would pack the place with his fan base. I heard about it from a mutual friend who worked there. Nobody came, literally nobody. Jagger played his distorted music to an empty room for an hour. When the night ended, the bar owner demanded the rest of the payment. Maud's card was declined, likely maxed out from their recent steak dinners and buying the DJ gear. Jagger tried to pay with his exposure and future fame. The bar owner wasn't having it. He seized Jagger's plastic speakers and the controller as collateral. Jagger came home crying that night. I heard from a neighbor that he was screaming on the front lawn, blaming me for bad vibes, ruining his gig. He was a complete failure, and he still couldn't see it. Desperate, broke, and furious, Jagger went to TikTok. He decided to play the only card he had left, the victim. He posted a video with a sad, black and white filter. He looked into the camera with teary eyes, sniffing loudly. "Hey guys," he said. "My rich, selfish sister is suing our struggling family over an old piano. She made us homeless. She doesn't care about us. Please donate to our GoFundMe to help us fight this injustice." The video started to trend. People love a sob story and they love to hate a villain. Within hours, strangers were commenting, calling me a monster. They said I was greedy. They said family should come first. I watched the view count tick up. 10K, 50K, 100K. My phone started blowing up with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, asking how I could be so cruel to my own brother. It was a nightmare. They were trying to destroy my reputation to save their own skins. Tally's came over to the cafe where I was hiding, sipping cold coffee. She saw my face and slammed her laptop open. "Time to clear the air. We aren't going to cry. We are going to use facts." We set up a camera. I sat down, took a deep breath, and showed the evidence. I held up the appraisal. 80,000. Asterisk, I held up the receipt. Asterisk. 80,000. Asterisk, I held up the receipt. Asterisk. 500. I showed the will to a Liddy. Then we played the clip of Jagger's studio, where the piano used to be, showing the confetti on the floor. My caption was simple. My parents sold my $80K inheritance for $500 to buy a toy DJ set. Now they are suing me for wanting it back. We hit post. The internet exploded. The tide turned instantly. The comments shifted from hate to horror. People were tagging legal experts. The story went from a family drama to a viral justice campaign. Everyone saw the truth. My parents were greedy, and my brother was a delusional brat. Jagger's GoFundMe was flagged for fraud and removed within 2 hours. His social media accounts were flooded with hate comments. People were mocking his music and his entitlement. Roscoe called me that night. He was sobbing, a broken man. "Liddy, make it stop," he begged. "Your mother can't leave the house. People are staring at us at the grocery store. They know who we are. They're laughing at us." "Give me the money," I said, my voice cold as ice. We don't have it," he stammered. "We spent the 500. "I don't mean the 500, I said. "I mean the 80,000. You owe me the value of what you stole." "We can't pay that. We don't have that kind of money." "Then save your tears for the judge," I said, and hung up. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. With Ambrose's legal team backing me, and the viral evidence supporting my claim, I filed a lawsuit. The charges were conversion and treble damages. Because the theft was malicious, proven by their lies, the lockout, and the extortion attempt, the state law allowed me to sue for 3 times the value of the stolen item. We weren't asking for 80,000. We were asking for $240,000. My parents received the court summons. They had to liquidate their retirement accounts just to hire a defense attorney. Their lawyer took one look at the case, the recording, and the will, and told them it was a disaster. They were bleeding money, and the trial hadn't even started. They were facing financial ruin, and it was entirely their own fault. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing they were finally facing consequences. A week later, their lawyer contacted mine. They wanted to settle. The offer was pathetic. They proposed that I could move back into the house, and they would forgive the $2,000 monthly rent for 1 year. In exchange, I would drop the lawsuit and let them keep any future proceeds if the piano was ever sold again. I read the email and laughed. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. "They still think they have power," Tally said, shaking her head in disbelief. "They think a room in their house is a prize. They think you are desperate." "I don't want a room in that house," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "I want justice. I want them to pay for what they did." We sent a one-word reply: no. It was the most powerful word I had ever written. It signaled the end of their control over me. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their plaintiff. We went to arbitration. It was a sterile conference room with a long mahogany table. Maud tried to play the victim, crying about all the sacrifices she had made raising me, trying to sway the room. The arbitrator, a stern woman with glasses, cut her off mid-sob. "Mrs. Vane," the arbitrator said sharply, "you sold an heir's property for pennies out of spite and greed. You admitted to knowing the ownership was disputed. This is not a misunderstanding. It is theft." The ruling was swift and brutal. They owed me the full market value of the piano, $80,000, plus legal fees and damages for the illegal lockout. The total came to nearly $120,000. They didn't have the cash. They had to list the house for sale to pay me. The house that I was kicked out of was now being sold to pay for the crime they committed against me. I had the legal right to retrieve the piano. I stood in Ambrose's warehouse, running my hand over the ivory keys. It was beautiful. It was perfect. But as I looked at it, I felt a heavy weight in my chest. This piano had been the catalyst for the destruction of my family. It carried the weight of their betrayal. If I kept it, every time I played, I would think of the confetti, the lies, and the greed. "I can't take it," I told Ambrose, my voice quiet. "I don't have a home for it, and it reminds me of them. It feels tainted." Ambrose nodded, understanding. "Then let's do this right. I will buy it, legitimately, for $80,000. He wrote the check on the spot. He handed it to me. It felt lighter than the piano, but much more powerful. It was the key to my future and the closing of a painful chapter. I used the money to buy a modern condo in the city, far away from the suburbs and the memories of that house. I bought a brand new, state-of-the-art grand piano. It was sleek and black, and it had no history. It was a blank slate. My parents are living in a small rental apartment now. I heard they blame each other for the loss of the house. Jagger is working delivery shifts to pay off his debts. His DJ career is officially over before it even began. I sat at my new piano in the silence of my own home. I placed my fingers on the keys. I didn't play my grandmother's favorite song. I played something new, something I wrote myself. It wasn't a song of loss. It was a song of freedom. I played, and for the first time in a long time, the music was all mine. The silence of the past was gone, replaced by my own melody.